Welcome back. Get comfortable, dim the lights, and let your mind drift. Tonight we're going through a long, slow collection of true, strange, and calming facts, one after another, no rush at all. If you fall asleep before the end, that's exactly what this is for. The city of Damascus has been lived in continuously for thousands of years, meaning someone has woken there, made a meal, and gone back to sleep every day for longer than most nations have existed. Speaking of that, Mississippi is the only state in the country with no law that expressly bans an open container of alcohol inside a moving car. Every other state closed that particular gap in its highway code decades ago, leaving Mississippi as a quiet holdout on an old rule almost nobody remembers being written. Here's a change of pace. The United States tried keeping daylight saving time in place all year round on two separate occasions, once during the Second World War to save energy and again in the 1970s during an energy crisis, and both times so many people missed the earlier winter sunrise that the country quietly switched back. Here's a strange one. Vikings did not wear horned helmets in battle. That image came from 19th century opera costumes and stuck in popular imagination ever since. Here's a change of pace. Oxford University in England is older than the Aztec Empire. Teaching had already been happening at Oxford for more than a century before the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was founded. Something else, now. Medieval people often slept in two shifts, waking in the quiet middle of the night for an hour or so of calm wakefulness before drifting back to a second sleep. Here's another one. Silly putty emerged from wartime laboratory attempts to invent a synthetic rubber, a failed experiment that bounced, stretched, and eventually became one of the best-selling toys of the century. Moving along, in 1930, an 11-year-old girl named Venetia Burney suggested the name Pluto for a newly discovered planet after her grandfather read her the news over breakfast. She lived to see Pluto reclassified as a dwarf planet in 2006, 3 years before she died at 90. Let's stay on this a little longer. The oldest known melody that can still be played was written down more than 3,000 years ago, in the ancient kingdom of Ugarit, on a tablet of clay. Here's something else worth knowing. In February 2018, a single Telugu character sent by text message was found to crash iPhones and other iOS devices the moment it appeared on screen. Apple traced the bug to how the character combined several smaller symbols and fixed it in the next software update. Here's a change of pace. And Frank's older sister Margot also kept a diary while the family hid from the Nazis, and then once asked if she could read it. Margot's diary was never found after the war and is considered lost for good. Here's a change of pace. For much of history, blue was one of the rarest and most expensive colors an artist could use, because it had to be ground from a semi-precious stone carried thousands of miles. Moving along, in the weeks before D-Day, several of the invasion's secret code names appeared innocently as crossword answers in a London newspaper, and the puzzled officers who investigated found only a schoolmaster and his puzzle-loving students. Here's another one. In the ancient city of Rome, an hour of daylight in summer was longer than an hour of daylight in winter, because they simply divided whatever daylight there was into 12 equal parts. Here's a change of pace. A Liberty cargo ship was once assembled from parts in under 5 days as a morale-boosting demonstration, welded together around the clock by shipyard crews that included thousands of newly trained workers. Moving along, every night of the Blitz, a small volunteer watch patrolled the roof of St. Paul's Cathedral with buckets of sand and water, and the Great Dome came through the war still standing over London. On a similar note, the Great Wall of China was built and rebuilt over nearly 2,000 years by many different dynasties, so it is less a single wall than a long conversation across centuries. Here's something else worth knowing. The story that carrots help you see in the dark was spread by British wartime posters, partly to explain away how their pilots kept finding planes at night, which was really the work of a new invention called radar. On a similar note, archaeologists have found sealed jars of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are more than 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible, preserved by honey's natural low moisture and acidity. On a similar note, the code created from the Navajo language by American code talkers was never broken, because it lived not in a machine but in the memories of a few hundred speakers of one of the world's most complex languages. Here's a change of pace. Victory gardens planted in backyards, parks, and even flower boxes eventually grew around 40% of the fresh vegetables eaten in the United States during the war. Moving along, a Syrian brown bear named Wojciech was adopted by Polish soldiers, learned to carry crates of supplies alongside them, and was formally enlisted with a rank, a paybook, and his own serial number. One more like that. When the movie Tron came out in 1982, the Academy Awards actually left it out of the running for the visual effects prize, because using computers to help build the effects struck some judges as too close to cheating to count as real filmmaking craft. Here's another one. A jet stream of fast-moving air high above the Pacific was mapped by wartime scientists, the same river of wind that airliners now ride to shave hours off long flights. One more like that. The voice actor who played Optimus Prime in the original Transformers cartoon based the character's calm, steady delivery on his own older brother, a Marine officer who had served in the Vietnam War. His brother's advice was simple: real heroes do not yell, they stay controlled enough to be gentle. Here's a change of pace. M&M's chocolate was first sold in the 1940s partly because its hard sugar shell survived heat, which made it practical to include in soldiers' rations in warm climates. One more like that. Wartime blackouts made city skies so dark that many people saw the Milky Way clearly from their own doorsteps for the first time in their lives. On a similar note, penicillin went from laboratory curiosity to mass production in just a few wartime years, and by the summer of 1944 there was enough to treat every wounded Allied soldier who needed it. One more like that. A young Lionel Messi was diagnosed with a growth hormone deficiency at age 10, and the treatment his family needed cost more than his father's insurance could keep covering. A boyhood spent waiting on injections and slow growth charts turned into one of the most decorated careers in the sport's history. On a similar note, for the D-Day landings, the Allies built 2 entire harbors in Britain, floated the pieces across the sea and assembled them on the far shore, complete with piers that rose and fell with the tide. Let's stay on this a little longer. Some pilots learned to nudge flying bombs off course without firing a shot, easing a wingtip under the bomb's small wing until the airflow gently rolled it away from the city below. One more like that. The strong cloth tape now found in every toolbox was developed during the war to seal ammunition boxes against water, and soldiers nicknamed it duck tape because water rolled off it like a duck's back. Let's stay on this a little longer. For 3 wartime ceremonies, Hollywood's Oscar statuettes were made of painted plaster because metal was needed elsewhere, and winners could trade them for gold ones when peace returned. Here's another one. Colossus, one of the world's first programmable electronic computers, was built in wartime Britain to read coded messages, and its existence remained a secret for 3 decades after the war. One more like that. When American sailors and soldiers traveled the world, they left behind a small doodle of a long-nosed face peering over a wall with the words "Kilroy was here," a gentle joke that circled the entire planet. Here's another one. Of the first animals to receive the Dickin Medal, Britain's award for animal bravery, most were pigeons, quietly carrying messages home through weather and distance on nothing but instinct. Here's another one. The British spy agency once floated a corpse ashore carrying carefully faked letters, a theater ticket and a photograph of an imaginary sweetheart, and the quiet deception helped mislead an entire army. One more like that. The shortest recorded war in history lasted about 38 minutes, when British forces bombarded a royal palace in Zanzibar in 1896 until the ruling sultan surrendered. Speaking of that, the Great Wall of China was not built as a single continuous project. It was constructed, extended, and repaired by many different dynasties over roughly 2,000 years. Here's a change of pace. While filming Conan the Barbarian in Spain in 1981, James Earl Jones and a young Arnold Schwarzenegger worked out a quiet trade between takes. Jones coached him through his line readings while Schwarzenegger helped keep him in shape. Schwarzenegger later credited that easy mentorship as part of what taught him the actual craft of acting. Moving along, the emergency chocolate bar issued to American soldiers was designed on purpose to taste only a little better than a boiled potato, so that no one would be tempted to eat their emergency rations early. One more like that. Robert Pattinson gave director Christopher Nolan a book of Oppenheimer's speeches from the 1950s as a wrap gift after they finished filming Tenet together. Nolan later said reading it was what first hooked him on the story, and it eventually led him to make the film Oppenheimer. On a similar note, a brave carrier pigeon named G.I. Joe once flew 20 miles in 20 minutes to deliver a message that stopped a planned bombing, saving an Italian village, and was later given a medal for gallantry. Let's stay on this a little longer. In 2008, Rwanda became one of the first countries in the world to ban plastic bags outright, with real penalties for anyone caught using one. Kigali, the capital, is now often called the cleanest city in Africa, helped along by a monthly nationwide cleanup morning called Umuganda that many Rwandans still take part in. That's all for tonight. Wherever you are in your night by now, rest well. We'll be back with more next time.